when we encounter the glory of God, we are encountering the person of God making himself known to us. And how we receive and interact with him, with his glory, shows our relationship with him and can show like the steps of our relationship with him. And if you go back to Exodus, where you see God's glory manifested a lot, you see how different people interact, and that there's different steps and there's different places of intimacy. So when the children came to when the children of Israel came to the mountain, and God wanted to make a covenant with them, you have the glory of God showing up. You have Moses and Aaron and 72 other people going up, seeing God on his throne, and you've got the ground under God's feet is sapphire, and they're going into a relationship with God, seeing God, but it's like a large dinner party where you may or may not talk to the guest of honor, and they eat and they drink, and they're in the presence, but there's not a lot of closeness or intimacy yet. And then God talks to Moses and says, "Come up to the mountain with me." And he does, and the cloud descends. And then, so there's Moses going up, the cloud of God descending, and we find out that that cloud, in the view of the children of Israel, they saw it and they recognized it as God's glory. And it says, "Now the appearance of the glory of the Lord was like a devouring fire on the top of the mountain in the sight of all the people of Israel." And that interaction with the glory of God, they saw it, they knew what it was, and they saw his power and his strength and his authority, but it's still very distant. It's awe-inspiring, and gets that awe-filled fear of God going. But the relationship isn't close, it's kept distant. And in that very devouring fire on the mountain, Moses is in it, and he's talking to God, and he's listening and writing down the law. And when he comes back, there's a problem. You know, there's the people in idol worship at that time, and he has to deal with that, and things are broken. But he sets up a tent of meeting outside, and he goes out and he talks with God, and the Bible refers to it as a man like talking to his friend. And the glory of God would show up in the tent of meeting. Moses would be talking to him in that friendship-like manner, and the cloud would be in front of it so people couldn't interrupt. And also at that same time, the people were still recognizing the glory of God, because they were at their tents, and they stayed at their tents at the distance and worshiped. And so there was still that distant relationship and recognition of the glory. But Moses had entered in and was relating, having relationship with God, and he asked him questions, and he talked to him, and God answered, and it was a friendship relationship. And so it seems like Moses is really, he's in the glory of God very often, and he has that relationship with God. But we get to the point where Moses is like, "Okay, I know you've said that I have your favor and you know me by name, but I'm not leaving this place without you." And God says, "I will go with you, and I will go with you and the children of Israel, and because I know you by name and you have my favor." And he's having this interaction with God, and it seems so close, because God is saying, "I favor you, I know you by name." But then what Moses asks, and what's on his heart, he says, "Show me your glory." And when I first read this, I'm like, what? Show me your glory? You've been in the glory. You've been hanging out with God. The very reality of God is right there with you, and you're asking, "Show me your glory." But that's what Moses does. He begs. He says, show me your glory. And God says, I will let my goodness pass before you. And he starts about talking himself as a physical person, how right now Moses cannot see his face, but he'd make it so he could see his back, and his goodness would go before him, and he would declare his name before Moses. And so that's another understanding of how the glory is a manifestation of the person of God. He's showing himself, he's bringing reality to him, of himself, who he is, and his authority, and showing us and interacting with us. And so God says yes, but there's also he has this, you can't see my face. And it says, no one can see my face or they'll die. And it seems to be a timing thing, and at that time no one they couldn't handle it, and that part of his glory couldn't be revealed at that time because, I think, because of covenant and relationship and where it was. But Moses was given what he asked for. And God let his goodness pass before Moses. He spoke his name to Moses, and he promised that I'm going to do greater miracles than you've ever seen, anybody's ever seen, and take you where I said I would take you. And after that encounter, when Moses went back to the children of Israel, his face showed he had the residue of the glory of God on his face. Now, he had spent time in the glory. He had interacted with God, but there hadn't been a residue until he pushed deeper and said, show me your glory. And then there's this residue on his face. And I think we really like to admire Moses for the relationship that he had with God, that he could talk to God as a man would talk to a friend. But I don't think we even get the fullness of it, because when you go into the verse in Numbers where it says, with Moses I speak clear, face to face, clearly and not in riddles. And I looked up that face to face. He didn't say face to face. He said, with Moses I speak mouth to mouth. With Moses, Moses had a close, intimate relationship, but it was only a kiss. It couldn't go farther within that covenant. And I used to really get excited, and I'm like, God, I want a relationship like Moses where I can talk to you face to face, clearly and not in riddles. And then when I read that, to have a relationship where I kiss the very face of God and he kisses me. And it blew my mind until I realized that in the new covenant, it's so much bigger. It's so much bigger because we were made to be the temple of God. And within the new covenant, he comes within us. We are his temple. He lives within us. It's not a courtship relationship anymore. It's full-on marriage where God enters into us, conceives and births things from us. And where in the Old Testament we saw the glory showing up as fire and clouds and wind and whatnot, and making him real, showing his authority. Now his glory is shown through his people. It says we have a glorious inheritance. Paul talks about enduring much that he may reveal in himself reveal through himself the glory of God. And it's our call, it's our place as we've come into relationship with God and give our lives to him and become temples of his Spirit, to be the manifestation of his glory, showing the reality of who he is, showing the very substance and authority of who God is. And that's pretty awe-inspiring, but there's still steps to be taken to move through intimacy. And some people are holding back and acting like we're still in the old covenant, where you could only go so far. Even Moses, he only got the residue of glory. He didn't get the glory in him. He only got the residue of glory. And we don't realize that it's further and deeper. And I just really want to encourage you that God is showing and manifesting his glory, and showing different facets of himself. And sometimes still he does do where people see fire or beautiful mists and fog, but most often he's showing his glory through his people who are willing to allow him to enter in, conceive things in them, and birth the manifestation of his glory. And even when we make that decision, we can continue going further in intimacy and being changed by him, that we can manifest his glory even more. And in that, I'm going to read 2 Corinthians 3:18. And we all, with unveiled face, beholding the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the same image from one degree of glory to another. For this comes from the Lord, who is the Spirit. We are being transformed from glory to glory. We are being transformed from one place where we will show his substance and his reality and his authority to the world, to another, as we continue to interact with him, interact with his glory that he presents before us. You get to take on God's reputation, what is known of him, and show the world who he is, and to carry the weight of who he is. And remember, that's not heavy. His yoke is easy and his burden is light. Go for it.